Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 281 Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira is almost here, and this video is going to be my top 3 reasons I love UFC 281. I'm going to be going from 3 to 1, 1 being the reason I most love UFC 281. And I'm going to scratch deeper than the surface level of 281. I'm not just going to say, oh, this is a great fight, that's a great fight, and so on and so forth. I'm going to give you 3 legitimate reasons that I absolutely love this card. This is one of the most anticipated fight cards of the year. You look back at 2021, and you had those 3 fight cards, those 3 pay-per-views to end the year, even though 267 was technically free. You had 267, 268, and 269. And while 2022 for MMA, especially with the fight nights, haven't been particularly amazing this year, I mean, 280, 281, and 282 are all incredible pay-per-views. And I really think we're kind of getting spoiled towards the end of 2022 with some of these pay-per-view fight cards, because 281 is stacked, 282 is stacked, 280 was obviously crazy stacked. And these are some great fight cards, and I'm really looking forward to talking about them. I'll be doing a bunch of prediction videos next week for UFC 281, so if you enjoy those videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And if you guys enjoy these videos, the top 3 reasons I love, the top 3 reasons I hate for each and every UFC pay-per-view, make sure to do me a favor and like this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps boost it in the algorithm. Moving on to some honorable mentions, because I didn't want to just throw out, every reason under the sun. And I felt like these 2 reasons are too particularly easy just to point out. So I really didn't want to put them on the top 3 list, but I still wanted to talk about them. And first off, the prelims of UFC 281 are absolutely stacked. Obviously, the main card is stacked, which we'll talk about briefly here in a second as well. But the prelims look incredible. Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. What a fight that is. You have Renato Moicano coming off of that loss to Rafael dos Anjos, where he stepped in on short notice. They kept it 5 rounds for whatever reason, and he just got absolutely mauled and destroyed. But he's had some time off, and he's coming back and fighting Brad Riddell, who's coming off 2 losses. He lost to Jalen Turner, he lost to Rafael Fiziev, and now he's trying to get back on the winning track. And Brad Riddell's a guy that a lot of people saw as a future top 15 lightweight fighter. So this is a solid fight. Both guys are action fighters. This is an incredible prelims. This is headlining the prelims. You have Dominic Reyes versus Ryan Spann on the prelims as well. Dominic Reyes, talk about the John Jones curse. He goes from almost dethroning John Jones and becoming the light heavyweight champion to then losing to Jan Blachowicz and getting absolutely mauled by Jan Blachowicz. And then to rebound after that, the UFC gives him Yuri Prochazka, the future, at that point in time, light heavyweight champion, where he gets spinning back elbowed, KO'd, and he's been sitting out since then. I believe that was in May or April of 2021, and he's been out for a long while. And now he returns against Ryan Spann, and Ryan Spann can knock any man dead. And this is clearly a main card fight. This could even honestly be like a main event of a fight night, to be quite honest. But this is on the prelims. I'm really looking forward to this fight. And the list goes on and on as far as the prelims. Aaron Blanchfield, Molly McCann. Molly McCann getting her first real test. And there's some hype around Molly McCann. She's riding the coattails of Patty Pimblett, but she's fought lesser competition, and now she's finally getting that first tough test against Aaron Blanchfield. You got Andre Petroski, Wellington Turman, solid fight. You got Otman Azaitar versus Matt Frivola. These prelims are incredible, and all of them are just to set up the amazing main card. Dan Hooker, Claudio Puelles. Dan Hooker, he went back down to featherweight. He got brutalized by Arnold Allen. And now he's on this massive losing streak, and he's fighting an up-and-coming guy like Claudio Puelles. This is a must-win for Dan Hooker. You have Frankie Edgar versus Chris Gutierrez. That's a decent fight as well. It's not the greatest fight ever, but it's a decent fight at bantamweight. You have Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, which we'll talk about more here in a second. Incredible fight. Everyone's excited for that fight. You have Carla Esparza, Wei Li Zhang for the strawweight title. Another solid fight. And then the main event, of course, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira for the middleweight title. This fight card has 2 title fights, and then the feature fight on the main card, obviously Chandler versus Poirier. Incredible. This is a very solid fight card, but I didn't want to, obviously that's super easy. Everyone can tell that. That's why it's an honorable mention. The other honorable mention that I have is that Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler could be the fight of the year. and it could be one of the greatest UFC fights and greatest MMA fights of all time. You look at Dustin Poirier. When has he ever been in a boring fight? His loss against Charles Oliveira, super exciting. His last 2 fights with Conor McGregor, because he's had 3 fights. He got knocked out in the first round back in, I think, 2013. But both fights with Conor McGregor, while they lasted, super exciting. The Dan Hooker fight from 2020 is one of the greatest lightweight fights of all time. If you did not watch that fight, that's a super underrated fight. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, absolutely incredible. You have the Max Holloway fight where Dustin Poirier wins the interim lightweight title, incredible fight. You had the Eddie Alvarez fight, the Justin Gaethje fight. The list of exciting fights for Dustin Poirier goes on and on and on. And then you put him in the cage against Michael Chandler, who I know a lot of people, they've only known him for 2 years because he came to the UFC. Maybe they didn't follow him over in Bellator. Michael Chandler is one of the most exciting MMA fighters of all time. Those fights with Eddie Alvarez over in Bellator were phenomenal. And then even if you want to just talk about Michael Chandler's UFC fights, he brutalizes Dan Hooker in the first round. Look what he did to Tony Ferguson. Oh my God, I don't even want to think about it, but insanity. You have the Charles Oliveira fight, which only lasted a round and then 30 seconds. But that was one of the most incredible fights I've ever seen, especially for how short it was. So many momentum swings, absolutely incredible. And then you have Michael Chandler also versus Justin Gaethje, an amazing fight. And I really believe you take Dustin Poirier, who's in nothing but exciting fights. You take Michael Chandler, who's in nothing but exciting fights. And you put them together, and I think this has the recipe to be ranked as one of the best MMA fights of all time. So I'm really looking forward to this fight. And it has some legitimate stakes. Both guys are ranked in the top 5 of the division. And, you have Dustin Poirier's stamina and durability and volume versus Michael Chandler's crazy power and explosiveness. And there's no way that fight sucks. And I really think it could go down in history as one of the greatest MMA fights of all time. Okay, moving on to the actual list. I'm going to start with number 3. The number 3 reason I love UFC 281 is Frankie Edgar's retirement fight. And I know that sounds crazy. Oh, that's a reason you love UFC 281? Yes, it is. I hope that this is actually his last fight. You know how MMA retirements go. You never know. He could actually come back after this and maybe fight in another organization. But Frankie Edgar has won 1 out of his last 5 fights. And that one win against Pedro Munoz back in 2020, he lost that fight. He won by split decision. It was a borderline robbery. Pedro Munoz should have gotten that win. So you look at the other 4 fights that he actually lost on paper. The last fight at UFC 268, he gets front kick KO'd by Marlon Chito Vera. The fight before that, the flying knee from Corey Sandhagen, which just sends Frankie Edgar's lifeless body to the canvas. Absolutely brutal. Then Pedro Munoz, where he won by split decision. But then before that, the fight against the Korean Zombie, gets TKO'd in the first round in that fight as well. Then the fight before that, he took a lot of damage from Max Holloway. Frankie Edgar is a legend of the sport. He is a former lightweight champion. It's crazy. He was the lightweight champion. He wasn't even cutting weight. And when he lost the belt, it was 2 close fights to Benson Henderson. Frankie Edgar's a legend of the sport, and I'm happy that he is calling it quits, okay? I am happy that he's going to retire. It hasn't gotten to the point where it's like, okay, now this guy's lost 7 in a row. He's only on a 2-fight losing streak. Say about him what you will. He's only on a 2-fight losing streak. Win or lose against Chris Gutierrez, I hope he's gone. He's fighting at Madison Square Garden, which is very close to his home state of New Jersey. And, not that I think the Chris Gutierrez fight is like a lock win for Frankie Edgar, but I think it's a winnable fight for him. So, to mold all these reasons into one, you have the fact that Frankie Edgar is going to retire. I'm happy about that. Get out now. I don't want to watch you get KO'd 5 or 6 more times, okay? Then you add the fact that he's fighting in his home state. Then you add the fact that it's a winnable matchup. I'm not saying he's definitely going to win, but it is a winnable matchup. He's not fighting a killer in the top 15 of the bantamweight division, which the bantamweight division is just crazy stacked. And then to add another, to mold all these reasons into one, I know people are going to complain that Frankie Edgar, Chris Gutierrez is on the main card. I'm happy the UFC is doing this. I know we complain sometimes, oh, this should be on the prelims, this should be on the main card. Frankie Edgar is a legend of the sport. He's a former champion. He deserves to be on the main card of his last fight in his UFC career. So I'm really looking forward to that. I hope he can, win or lose, I hope he rides off into the sunset. I don't want to watch. I'm tired of watching UFC legends get KO'd 10 times before then they go off to another organization and get KO'd a couple more times. So that's the number 3 reason. Moving on to the number 2 reason I love UFC 281. And this is highly speculative, okay? I admit this is highly speculative, and this is a bit of an early prediction for you. The number 3 reason I love UFC 281 is because I believe that Carla Esparza is going to get absolutely demolished by Wei Li Zhang. After that shit-stained performance in her last fight against Rose Namajunas, the rematch that we all never wanted to see at UFC 274, where Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas basically did nothing the entire fight. She left with a belt wrapped around her waist. And that didn't sit right with me, okay? And it's really bothered me since. The fight was awful. Neither one of them wanted to engage. And I said after that fight, I never want to see either one of these ladies fight again. It was an embarrassment to the sport. It was an embarrassment to women's MMA. And I really believe, you look at Carla Esparza, I know, she's on a decent win streak right now. She's on a 6-fight win streak. She got the split decision over Rose Namajunas, which I don't even want to call that a fight. Before that, she stopped Yan Xiaonan. But you start looking at some of the high-level names in recent history. Marina Rodriguez, she won a split decision. Michelle Waterson, she won a split decision. Alexa Grasso, she won a majority decision. You look at Wei Li Zhang, I really believe Wei Li Zhang is the perfect recipe to go out there and just absolutely murk Carla Esparza. And I really don't want to see that women's strawweight belt wrapped around the waist of Carla Esparza again. I can't stomach it. And I think Wei Li Zhang, with her power, with her striking ability, with her improved wrestling, I think she will go out there and absolutely just demolish Carla and take that strawweight belt off of her. And we don't have to watch Carla Esparza in any more title fights. I don't believe the UFC is going to give her any more title fights throughout her career. I think this is going to be her last title fight, and Wei Li Zhang's going to go out there. I mean, look what Wei Li Zhang did to Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her last fight at UFC 275. She went out there and spinning back fist KO'd Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Absolutely slept her. You don't see that in the lower weight women's division. You don't see that in the women's divisions at all. Before that, she lost to Rose Namajunas in a split decision. It was a rematch for the title. This was a very close fight. It could have went either way. And then the fight before that, she got KO'd by Rose Namajunas with a head kick in the first round. But you look back at some of her other fights. The fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk back at UFC 248, incredible fight. Probably, without a doubt, the best women's MMA fight of all time. You look what she did to Jessica Andrade. She went out there and slaughtered Jessica Andrade to win the title, back in 2019. I think Wei Li Zhang will be able to go out there, outstrike Carla Esparza, land with her power shots, and put Carla Esparza away and take that belt off of her. And, I thought about putting this reason at number 1, honestly, because I am really looking forward to that. But I figured it was kind of highly speculative. It may not actually happen. Who knows? Carla Esparza maybe go out there and out-wrestle her. Wei Li Zhang has been able to be taken down and controlled a little bit before. So you never know. But that's my number 2 reason I love UFC 281. Moving on to the number 1 reason I love UFC 281. And the number 1 reason is the backstory of the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. And for those of you who don't know, which I don't know how you don't know unless you're living under a rock at this point, Alex Pereira has 2 wins over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing. He defeated him in 2017. He KO'd Israel Adesanya. Then you go back to 2016. He beat Israel Adesanya by decision. And last year, I believe it was in maybe the summer of 2021, the UFC signed Alex Pereira. And with this signing of Alex Pereira, we all knew that they were going to try to fast track him to the title. But we all wondered, is he going to be able to slither his way through the rankings and make it to Israel Adesanya before he catches a loss? And he goes out there, he loses the first round of Andreas Michailidis, and then in the second round, he comes out and flying knee KOs him. Okay, we got him by him. Then he fights Bruno Silva. He beats Bruno Silva by decision. Had some issues in this fight as well, getting controlled a little bit. But he wins this fight. That's all that matters. And then the UFC says, okay, it's time for you to fight a ranked opponent. And they give him Sean Strickland at UFC 276, the same card in which Israel Adesanya defended his belt against Jarrett Cannonier. And Sean Strickland, I believe truly, don't get me wrong, Sean Strickland is a very good fighter. The UFC looked up and down those rankings and they said, who is the most likely opponent that is ranked in the top 10 that Alex Pereira can defeat? And Sean Strickland's primarily a striker. Alex Pereira is an elite level kickboxer. They said, okay, this is a perfect matchup. Sean Strickland may go out there and not wrestle with him. And sure enough, Sean Strickland goes out there and tries to strike with him. and gets put out cold. And the UFC said, okay, that's all I need to see. We're putting him in a title fight against Israel Adesanya. Then you have Adesanya, who is undefeated at middleweight in the UFC. His only loss in the UFC is when he moved up to fight Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight title at UFC 259. You look at his last few fights, I know they're not the most exciting. Jared Cannonier beats Jared Cannonier, doesn't run into any adversity. The fight before that, the rematch against Robert Whittaker. This fight was a little bit closer, but he's able to defeat Robert Whittaker. The fight before that, Marvin Vettori in the rematch. Defeats Marvin Vettori via decision. Then you go back all the way to 2020, you have the dismantling of Paulo Costa. At this point, Israel Adesanya has basically cleared out the middleweight division. I know you have some guys trying to make their way up. Nasruddin Imavov, you have Andre Muniz, you have other guys trying to make their way up in the middleweight division, but there's really nobody left. And now we have Alex Pereira, following a man that he defeated twice and once by knockout, following him over to the UFC, gets 3 wins under his belt, and is now going to try to defeat him for a third time in combat sports. And I just think this story is so intriguing because how does Israel Adesanya, how does he game plan for this fight? Is he going to try to mix in the wrestling? Because you look at Alex Pereira, people can say, you know, everyone knows his weakness is to be out-grappled. You know, we know it. But is Israel Adesanya going to be willing to try to wrestle with him? Or is he going to try to strike with him and win a decision at range like he typically does? I think that's a real possibility as well. And it's going to be very interesting to see, can Alex Pereira do it again? I just think this story is so compelling. Even though the losses are 5 and then 6 years ago, can Pereira get it done again? Does he have Israel Adesanya's number? And we're going to find out at UFC 281. And I think that makes that fight so compelling. Regardless of what happens in the actual fight, the whole storyline is going to put this tension on the fight. When the referee says, are you ready? Are you ready? And he tells him, okay, go. It's going to put this tension over this fight. Can Alex Pereira land that death touch of a left hook on Israel Adesanya and put one of the most dominant champions in the UFC? And I know he's had close fights, but he's been beating everybody. Can Pereira go out there and dethrone him and dethrone Israel Adesanya? I can't imagine. We watched him versus Jan Blachowicz lose, and I picked Jan Blachowicz in that fight. I expected him to lose that fight. Jan Blachowicz is massive. Alex Pereira looks pretty big as well. He looked huge in that photo against Dominic Reyes. Can he go out there? Does he have the mental edge over Israel Adesanya? Adesanya knows this is the guy that's KO'd me in the past. I'm curious his approach in this fight. And then you have the fact that they're both elite level strikers. Just the anticipation of this fight, the high tension of this fight, and the amazing backstory. I'm actually going to be watching the countdown for UFC 281. I don't always watch the countdowns. This is an incredible backstory. I can't wait to see the way the UFC sets it up. And I'm very curious if Alex Pereira is able to be what people are calling the boogeyman of Israel Adesanya. If he's able to go out there and brutally KO him, what happens from there? Because does Adesanya, because he's a long-reigning champion, does he get an immediate rematch? That's going to be interesting because now I think a lot of people are going to say, well, Pereira's 3-0 over him, even though those other 2 fights were in kickboxing. This main event has a lot of intrigue around it, and I'm really looking forward to UFC 281. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is there any reasons I missed why, you personally love UFC 281? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and I will see you in the next video.